Hi everyone, Coach Sipho here, and today's tutorial is more like a combo of endgames, meaning we are going to learn different types of endgames in one tutorial. To be more precise, we are going to learn 3 different types of endgames. Number 1, you are going to learn how to win with the king and the pawn against the lonely king. Number 2, you are going to learn the same endgame but when you are on the defending side this time. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen players failing to use their king to shepherd their pawn to the end of the board. The same is true for the defending players. How many times have I seen them losing games they were supposed to draw? Lastly, I am going to teach you how to checkmate with the queen and the king. I know. Now, you might be saying, Coach Sipho, no, I know how to checkmate with the queen and the king. But let's face it, when we get to the end game, we are usually very low on time. So it is not a matter of whether you can checkmate or not, but it's more a matter of how fast can you do it. So without wasting any more time, let's jump into it. Here we go. Welcome to the demonstration board. As you can see, white has the king and the pawn against a lonely king. In this position, if it is white's turn to make a move, white will be able to easily win this game. However, if it is black's turn to play, black can also draw this position easy, provided that both of them make correct moves. Believe it or not, most players would draw this position as white even though it is their turn. If you don't believe me, I suggest that you pause right now and tell us what would you play on the comment section. Okay, so let's start. We are going to start with how to win the position with a king and the pawn. After that, we are going to learn how to defend when you play against the king and the pawn. So let's start with how to win. If you want to win with the king and the pawn, there are 2 principles you need to keep in mind. The principle of the opposition and the principle of leading with the king instead of leading with the pawn. Now, opposition means moving your king so that it faces the opponent's king, separated by 1 square in between. So if white wants to win the opposition, white would go there, winning the opposition. The principle of leading with the king defines itself. It simply means moving the king forward instead of leading with the pawn. So you want to achieve both of those principles. Now, if it is white's turn, this is the best move. White is leading with the king instead of leading with the pawn. At the same time, white is also winning the opposition because 2 kings are facing each other, separated by just 1 square. Take note that if the black king was on d6 square, then the best move for white would be this one. This one is no longer winning. So white must play this move. It is not enough to lead with the king, but you must also win the opposition. These moves win the opposition and it also puts the king in front of the pawn, leading with the king. So once the kings face each other, and when they are on the same line as the pawn, if the black king goes to the left, you must go to the right. Make sure you touch that square so that black won't go to that square anymore. If black tries to go in front of the pawn again, you simply win the opposition. If black goes to the right, you go to the left. If black goes to the left, you go to the right. Same thing. Now, black goes to the right, we are going to go to the left and prevent black from going to that square again. Remember, 2 kings cannot touch, so black cannot go there again. If black tries to approach your pawn, you bring your pawn. You don't want to leave your pawn too behind. Now, if black goes there, you push your pawn again. The king is still in front of the pawn. The king is in front. The pawn is at the back. Always the king must lead. If the black king tries to block the pawn, just lead with the king and also win the opposition. If the black king goes to the left, you know what we do. We go to the right, diagonal up to the right. Now, once you are in contact with the queening square, nothing else your opponent will do. The pawn will simply go and queen now. The pawn is protected by the king, so black cannot capture it. And then your pawn finally got to the end, and you can promote it into any piece you want, but the queen is the strongest. So it is usually a good idea to promote it into a queen. Now you know how to win with a king and the pawn. The next step is to learn how to defend, just in case you play against the king and the pawn. We already know that if it is white's turn in this position, white will win the opposition and also putting the king in front. If the black king was there, white would also win because white would lead with the pawn. The king is in front. White is also winning the opposition. But unfortunately, it is black's turn in this position. If you want to defend this position, there are 3 principles you need to keep in mind. The principle of the opposition, the principle of blockade, and the principle of reserve blockade. You already know what is the opposition now. It simply means moving your king directly in front of the opponent's king, separated by 1 square. So you already know what is the opposition. You want to win the opposition, or you want to win the 2 other principles. The 2 other principles is blockade and the reserve blockade. So in this position, black can simply win the opposition. Now white can no longer lead with the king. He will be forced to move to lead with the pawn. Once white pushes the pawn, you can go to the principle of blockade. Blockade simply means putting your king in front of the pawn, blocking the pawn so that it cannot move. Now if white goes there, you can go to the reserve blockade. The reserve blockade means the square just behind the blockading square. If white goes there, now you will keep on moving around these 3 principles. You ask yourself, can I blockade? No. If you cannot blockade, remember 2 kings cannot touch. If you cannot blockade, you ask yourself, can I win the opposition? Yes, you can win the opposition. So you go there. If they push the pawn, can I win the opposition? You are already there, but it is your turn to make a move. Can I win the blockade? Yes, there is the blockade. Just block the pawn. If the king goes there, can I win the opposition? You are already there. Can I win the blockade? You are already there. You are blocking the pawn. Now, what else can you do? The reserve blockade. If the king goes there, you cannot blockade because 2 kings cannot touch. You are already on the reserve blockading square. What else can you do? You win the opposition. You basically repeat the same thing until you get a draw. Now we'll play fast so that I show you how it looks like at the end. Reserve blockade. Winning the opposition. Blockade. Now, if the only way for white to defend the pawn is to come here, if he goes anywhere else, white will lose the pawn. If white goes there, it is the stalemate. Stalemate simply means the draw. The black king is not in a check, so it is not a checkmate. Checkmate means the king is in danger and it has nowhere to go. Stalemate means the king is not in danger, but it has nowhere to go. If it goes there, it would be a check. If it goes there, it would be a check. It cannot go there because 2 kings cannot touch. That's how you draw against the king and the pawn. Now, we are going to learn how to win with the king and the queen against the lonely king in less than 10 seconds. Of course, it might appear to be slow because I'm going to be explaining. But when I am playing, I play like faster than I will be explaining. So let's say the king, you have the queen and the king. We can start anywhere. Here, if you want to win with the queen and the king in less than 10 seconds, there are two principles you need to remember. The first one is to go to the knight shadow with your queen. Knight shadow, you pretend as if you are the knight, and then you put the opponent's king in a check. Principle 2, you are going to copy whatever the black king does until the king gets to the corner. Meaning if the king goes there, you copy exactly that to maintain the knight shadow. If the king goes to the diagonal, that direction, you also go diagonal that direction to maintain the knight shadow. You copy the king. If the king goes there, you also go one diagonal down. If they go up, you also go up. If they go one diagonal down, you also go one diagonal down. If they go down, you follow them to maintain the knight shadow. If they go there, you follow them. When they get to the corner, and this is very important, once the opponent's king gets to the corner, you don't copy it anymore. Otherwise, it would be a stalemate. We know what is a stalemate. The opponent's king is not in danger, but it has nowhere to go. So it would be a draw. So once the opponent's king gets to the corner, you don't copy it anymore. What the next step is to bring the king here so that you can protect your queen and checkmate. That's a checkmate. Congratulations, now you know how to win with the king and the pawn against the lonely king. And you also know how to defend, just in case you are on the defending side. And you also know how to win with the king and the queen, even if you get to the end game with very little time on your clock. So if you enjoyed today's tutorial, please click thumbs up. If you want more videos like this, please click the subscribe button and ring the bell. Thank you. See you next week.